Hello there and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are taking a look at some off-roading vehicles. These are cars that specialise off-road, so naturally we've taken them to the tarmac Top Gear track. We begin with the 2016 Jeep Wrangler Trailcat, 707 horsepower, 650 foot-pound torque, 4,600 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful car here today. It's also the torquiest vehicle here today, and quite possibly the most mental. Essentially, for those of you who don't know, the Jeep Wrangler Trailcat is what happens when you take a standard Jeep Wrangler, convert it for off-road use by getting rid of the doors for reasons, putting a roll cage in, making it shorter, so on and so forth, and then you just drop a Hellcat engine in it because why not? I really like the fact they painted it green. It is a mental vehicle, which I do appreciate. I'm not much of a Jeep person particularly, but even I have to admit I'm quite a fan of this idea, and also the car makes an absolutely fantastic noise. As far as it goes to drive, well, it kind of drives sort of as you'd expect. It is incredibly quick. It's four-wheel drive. It launches like no one's business. It is insane. However, that does come with a trade-off, and that's the fact that the handling of this vehicle is utterly atrocious. The front suspension can lift up occasionally. It understeers like no one's business. It can have issues with traction coming out the corners, the rear end will swing out at random. It is an utterly atrocious car to drive. Absolutely fantastic in noise and presence and acceleration, but terrible at literally anything else. Next up, we have the 2012 Bowler EXRS, 550 horsepower, 461 foot-pound torque, 3,858 pounds of weight. Essentially, Bowler is a company which takes Range Rovers and Land Rovers and then converts them into super, almost race cars for the dirt, designed to be as quick on tarmac as they are on dirt. And yeah, the Bowler EXRS is, as you can see, based off a humble Range Rover. Much like the Trailcat, it has been shortened, given this two-door design, which isn't a thing that you can get on Range Rovers, save for the most recent one. Pretty interesting car overall. I believe this probably has some form of Jaguar V8 under hood. 550 horsepower is consistent with those sorts of engines. As far as it goes to drive, it is pretty quick. As you'd expect, you know, four-wheel drive, 550 horsepower, it can launch pretty darn quickly. However, it does have some pretty bad brakes, it has to be said, and overall I describe this car as lacking. It's nowhere near as bad as the Trailcat, but it is not a particularly great handling vehicle per se. There are better handling SUVs out the box. Granted, they're not quite as fast, and they do weigh a lot more, but yeah, the Bowler, just not quite my sort of vehicle, but it certainly isn't too terrible. Next up, we have the 2016 Aerial Nomad, 235 horsepower, 221 foot-pound torque, 1,477 pounds of weight. We begin with the rear-wheel drive vehicles now, which are a curious choice for off-roading, especially in the case of the Nomad, considering this is supposed to be sort of the dune buggy version of the Aerial Atom, of course, which is what Aerial is most famous for. I'm not quite sure what engine this uses. Being an Aerial product, I'd imagine it's some form of Honda unit, but I'm not 100% confirmed on that. Yeah, making this rear-wheel drive is an interesting choice. I've heard off-road these aren't actually all that good as a result, but there you go. Also, this car is interesting in that it has its own spec race here in Forza Motorsport 7 in the actual career mode. As far as it goes to drive, it is, well, it has horrific low-speed understeer. Like, truly horrific. You turn the wheels at slow speed, especially through, say, a corner like the Hammerhead, it just will not turn, which is quite terrifying. Other than that, it's okay-ish. Again, just avoid those low-speed corners entirely, and it's not a bad vehicle to drive. It is a little bit soft, as you expect. It's nowhere near as good as, say, an Aerial Atom. But it is quite a fun little vehicle to sort of throw around the track. It can certainly have some usage in that regard. Next up, the 2014 Local Motors Rally Fighter, 430 horsepower, 424 foot-pound torque, 3,800 pounds of weight. This, on paper, is by far and away my least favourite vehicle here today. The Local Motors Rally Fighter is a rather curious case when it comes to being an off-road vehicle. I'm not sure if it has any architecture in other vehicles. It looks to me like it's based on some form of Camaro, but I'm almost fairly certain that is wrong. I don't know a whole lot about this vehicle, but what I do know is the base statistics. You know, 400 430 horsepower isn't bad, 424 foot-pound torque, whatever. However, it is rear-wheel drive, which is not ideal for this track and indeed off-roading, and it also has a 3-speed gearbox. I'm serious. I've got no idea why, but that's what it has. As far as it goes to drive, it's horrific. The front-end lift is almost unbearable. It basically means that you, through certain corners, just won't have any turning at all. As you can see, the front end is sort of lifting, and when it lifts, yeah, your front wheels aren't on the ground, so guess what? You can turn as much as you want, and the car won't make a lick of difference. It's not massively quick. The 3-speed gearbox severely hampers the acceleration abilities of this car. It's just an atrocious thing to drive. Probably my least favourite thing to drive out of everything here today. The local Motors Rally Fighter was not a fun car to drive, it has to be said. Next up, we have the 2013 Dodge Ram Runner, 390 horsepower, 407 foot-pound torque, 5,949 pounds of weight. This is the off-roading version of the legendary Dodge Ram pickup truck. Of course, interestingly enough, we have actually had a Ram go around this course before. The Ram 2500 Power Wagon took on the course a fair old while ago, and did, well, pretty mediocre. We're not expecting great things from this vehicle either. It's hardly going to be the quickest thing in the world. I mean, 390 horsepower compared to almost 6,000 pounds of weight doesn't exactly say speed machine to you, does it? As far as the Ram Runner goes to drive, it is sort of best summed up as big, heavy, and slow. Straight line speed is non-existent, really, in this. It's quicker than some vehicles, don't get me wrong, but because of the size of it, it certainly feels slower than quite a lot of vehicles. The size can be an issue going through corners. You need to bear in mind it's actually quite a lengthy car and quite a wide car as well, which around Top Gear track, which is a pretty tight and technical course, that can cause some issues. And other than that, heaviness is an issue as well. Of course, you really can feel that when you go around the corners, the understeer, it sort of all combines together to give this car sort of a lumbering profile. Certainly not bad by any stretch of the imagination. The handling can't really be all that bad considering how slow this thing is, but yeah, not ideal, it has to be said. Next up, we have the 2017 Ford F-150 Raptor Project Scorpio Edition. 450 horsepower, 507 foot-pound torque, 5,842 pounds of weight. This is a heavily modified version of a standard 2017 F-150 Raptor. I guess it's tuned by Forza. I'm not sure if this car has any real-life ties, particularly. I can't say I've ever seen a picture of it. I will say it's quite cool looking, with sort of the race suspension, the light bars, the green headlights, a certain feature that I really like, and it has quite a cool design on it. And yeah, I'm quite a fan of the way the Project Scorpio Edition looks. Probably the best looking thing here today, looking down the list. As far as this one goes to drive, it is, well, kind of sort of similar to the Ram Runner. It's big, it's heavy, however, it's not quite as slow. It is a little bit more perky in terms of its performance. I mean, that's what you get when you have 60 more horsepower and weigh slightly less. It's also quite good handling vehicle as well. Again, a little bit leany through the corners thanks to the race suspension, but because this vehicle has big tyres, it does feel pretty secure through the corners. I would certainly go with a standard F-150 over this 4-track use, if I was you, but other than that, yeah, the Project Scorpio, really not a bad vehicle to drive here. Probably one of the better ones here today, considering. Next up, well, we have the 2006 Hummer H1 Alpha, 300 horsepower, 520 foot-pound torque, 8,114 pounds of weight, and this is the heaviest car here today by quite a margin. Yes, the Hummer H1 Alpha. How can you think off-roading without thinking of the legendary Hummer line of vehicles, as long as you ignore the H2 and the H3, and pretty much everything Hummer did, apart from this original H1. Yeah, I say original, this one isn't quite the original. Of course, the original Hummer H1s came out sometimes in the 80s, sort of early 90s, they'd be used in the Gulf War, and the Alpha was essentially the king of the crop when it comes to H1s. This was the final edition. It was designed to be luxurious. It had a Duramax diesel engine, which screams luxury. yeah, I mean, it's not that impressive. These days, 300 horsepower, 520 foot-pound torque. I mean, 520 foot-pound is pretty good, but, you know, in terms of getting this car moving, this giant hunk of yellow metal, it doesn't do a particularly great job. It is massively slow. It is the slowest thing in the entire world, or at least that's what it feels like when you're actually driving it. Again, as usual, you have got to bear in mind the size of this vehicle. It is very, very wide. It is actually surprisingly not as long as you'd think compared to sort of some modern day sports cars and stuff. The Hummer H1 I think is actually only slightly bigger than a modern day Camry, but the wideness is a bit of an issue. Overall though, it's decent enough. I mean, the handling can't really be that affected when you're going this slow, so I guess that's a benefit to it either way. And finally today, we end with the 1968 Myers Manx, 60 horsepower, 82 foot-pound torque, 1,235 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful car here today, the least torquey car here today, and the lightest car here today. By, I would say by far, ignoring the Aerial Nomad, it is by quite a margin, but the Aerial Nomad and this actually weigh somewhat similar. So the Myers Manx, of course, what this is essentially a modified Volkswagen Beetle turned into a dune buggy. Wasn't exactly that uncommon with the Volkswagen Beetle to turn these into sort of kit cars, dune buggies. They were highly customizable in that regard. And Myers seems to be the company that got most famous doing these sort of dune buggy customizations, to the point where they're sort of recognized as their own manufacturer. And I believe Myers is still around today. I don't know if they're still sort of building Volkswagen Beetle derivatives, but I believe they are still in business today. As far as the Myers Manx goes to drive, I've got to be perfectly honest, this is by far and away the most fun car I drove here today. It is an absolute blast to chuck around some corners. Kind of reminds me of the Hot Wheels Beetle. I had quite a bit of fun with that, and yeah, this is huge amounts of fun. It's great to chuck around. It feels quick. You know, in terms of its actual overall acceleration, it can't be that much quicker than the Hummer, but it just feels it because you're sort of so open to the road, and because it's so light and so on and so forth. It does feel fast, which is rather peculiar. Yeah, a car I really, really enjoyed driving, the Myers Manx, and out of everything here today, it'd be the one I'd recommend to you. Anyways, moving on to the times, and the Bowler EXRS was the quickest car to get into 138th place with a 122.051. Not a bad time. Goes in between a Challenger SRT Hellcat and a Maserati 8CTF. Nothing really else like it, particularly in that sort of ballpark. So yeah, pretty decent time from that vehicle. In 148th place, we found the Aerial Nomad with a 122.298, slightly slower than a Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk, but it is quicker than an RS5 Coupe, a BMW M3. Yeah, really good time from the Nomad, considering how little power that thing has. In 168th place, we find the Jeep Wrangler Trailcat with 123.740, and honestly, it's quite lucky it got that time. Goes in between a Maserati Ghibli and a Nissan Skyline GTR. Yeah, a weird place for that car, but yeah, not a good car to drive at all. In 265th place, moving way down the board, we find the Local Motors Rally Fighter with a 128.948. Goes in between a Lancia Stratos and a Chevrolet Chevelle. It's about 3 seconds down on the Fast and Furious version of that vehicle. I can't remember if that had a better gearbox or not. In 322nd place, we find the Ford F-150 Raptor Project Scorpio Edition with 132.598. Goes in between an Alfa Romeo 75 and a Alfa Romeo 8C, slightly quicker than a Colorado V6. It is the second and a half down on a standard F-150 Raptor though, so do bear that in mind if you're going to select that vehicle. In 357th place, we find the Dodge Ram Runner with a 137.880. Goes in between an International Scout and a Maserati Type 35C. It is about a second quicker than a standard Dodge Ram 2500 Power Wagon though, so good credit to that vehicle there. And finally today, in 366th place, we find the Myers Manx with a 144.679, and in 378th place, we find the Hummer H1 Alpha with a 145.874, beats out a Nissan Safari Turbo Diesel, AMC Pacer, loses out slightly to a Toyota Hilux. Yeah, the Hummer, unsurprisingly, the slowest car he's today. I'm surprised the Manx went as quick as it did, though. And I would genuinely recommend that Manx. I did really like driving it. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this edition of Forza Top Gear Laps. Hopefully this should mark the return of this series, provided my throat does not get any worse. In case you was wondering, yes, I am ill. That's why I sound like I do, so thanks for asking. Yeah, join us for the Rivals episode, hopefully coming out on Saturday, and for the main episode, hopefully coming out next Tuesday, which will be a look at some more of the slowest cars in the game. How riveting. Join us for that. Until then, farewell.